we're going to go ahead and start our demo with our Pecora-Deck HB1100-SA. So I'm joined by Mike and Glenn, also in the Pecora Technical Service Group. So we're out here every year. You may have seen us, prior years out here on the microphones doing these live product demonstrations, and here we are once again. So we're going to be talking about some urethane traffic coating with some integral aggregate. So if you're familiar with Pecora, our bread and butter for many years were joint sealants, right? Pecora's been around a very long time, since 1862, over 160 years. We developed joint sealants for many years, progressed into coatings, wall coatings, floor coatings, and so forth. Control joint resins we'll be talking about, all types of commercial grade waterproofing products, right? So Pecora's been around a long time. You may be familiar with us. So again, today at 11 a.m., we're going to be talking about one of our available polyurethane deck coating systems, the HB1100-SA, and we'll talk about exactly what that is. But as I mentioned, it's one of, three available systems, all urethane-based materials, multi-laminate traffic coatings for pedestrian balconies, walkways, parking decks. These are traffic-grade coatings developed to protect concrete and plywood structures, right? You want to extend the life of that slab, that existing slab. You want to coat that plywood or concrete balcony, protect that balcony, extend the life. That's what these coatings do. So, if you're in the commercial waterproofing business, you're probably familiar with these traffic coatings, okay? So these are polyurethane-based coatings. There's primers, there's multi-laminate coatings. We have our Pecora-Deck 800 system, which is a one-component multi-laminate coating system. We have our HB1000, which is a high-build, industrial-grade polyurethane traffic coating system. We demonstrated that product a few years ago here at the World of Concrete. And this year, we're going to be demonstrating a new product for us, or newer. We came out last year. Again, it's the HB1100-SA. So the HB stands for high build. The SA stands for single application, right? So this is a single coat polyurethane traffic grade coating system. So as I mentioned, we do offer other coatings, multi-laminate, and historically, most of the coatings on the market for parking decks and so forth have been multi-laminate. And what I mean by multi-laminate is there's a primer typically, an adhesion promoter, a base coat, which is traditionally the waterproofing component of the system, an intermediate coat, and a top coat, which is your wear coat. And generally the top coat's available in a variety of colors, whatever the building owner may choose. And then historically you're going to be broadcasting aggregate into either the intermediate or the top coat, depending on your application. Again, these can be used for pedestrian and vehicular applications. So those are the multi-laminate systems. So you think about it, it's several steps, right? Usually if it's say a one-part system, you're gonna have to wait, do an overnight cure for each coating. So the point I'm making is here, it takes several days to complete a project, right, with a multi-laminate system. And at times that's okay, right? New construction and so forth, you have that time. However, the benefit of this single application or single application system, the HB1100-SA, is it's one coat. And I briefly alluded to, broadcasting aggregate into the coating. That's for slip resistance and so forth. All your traffic coating manufacturers are going to require that you broadcast some sort of aggregate into the coating to incorporate some level of slip resistance, right? Whether it's for vehicles or pedestrians. So that's just another step in the process, right? So we've eliminated all those steps with the Pecora-Deck HB1100-SA. It's one coat with integral aggregate, right? You're going to see as we go through the demonstration, we're going to be incorporating those aggregates into the coating during the mixing process, right? So that eliminates that step of having to broadcast aggregate manually into the coating. So we've eliminated several steps of the process with this single coat or single application system. So again, it's Pecora-Deck HB1100-SA. It's a waterproofing and wear coat all in one with integral aggregate. Again, we're going to emphasize it's simple, one-step application. For example, we're going to be demonstrating the pedestrian system. It's truly one step. There's no primer. You go down with your coating, with your integral aggregate, and that's it. Now, I can get into some of the surface prep guidelines and we start mixing the material and so forth, moisture content in the concrete and so forth. At times you may need a primer depending on moisture content. With our vehicular system, for example, which we'll be demonstrating tomorrow, the primer is required. It's a more robust application with a vehicular application. That primer we generally recommend, right? So, but for today, we're going to be demonstrating the pedestrian system. So all you need is clean and dry concrete, right, or plywood as your substrate. So no priming, so we're not going to be applying any primer today. This is a true single coat, single application process. So the HB1100-SA is available in 2 package sizes. We're going to be demonstrating the smaller units today. These are 1.8 gallon kits. So you have your base component here. We have 2 available colors, stone gray and colonial gray, right, 2 shades of gray. We also do custom colors of this material as well. So if you're going to order enough material, we can match any color you want. But standard colors, stone gray, colonial gray. So that base is going to be pre-tinted with the coloring. And then you have your activator, right? So this is a two-component chemically curing, high-build polyurethane traffic coating system, right? So you're going to have part A, part B, your base and your catalyst, your activator. And then the third component is your integral aggregate, right? So we talk about the single coat application. Everything's done in one application, one coat. So we're demonstrating the pedestrian system today. So we're going to want our pedestrian aggregate, and looks like we have the vehicular. Can we grab the pedestrian aggregate? Looks like we grabbed the vehicular here. So that's a good point. So when you order these kits, okay, we have 1.8 gallon kits for smaller projects, balconies, so forth. Maybe you're doing some repairs on a parking deck. You can use a smaller kit, 1.8 gallons. For larger projects, we have a 5.5 gallon kit option, okay, which would include a larger aggregate, of course. So whenever you're putting down this system, the only choice you really need to make, or choices I should say, is choose your color and choose your aggregate, right? And your aggregate selection is going to be based on the application. Vehicular, you want to order the vehicular aggregate, and of course pedestrian, the pedestrian aggregate. So here we have our pedestrian aggregate. The difference between the aggregates is size. We have a smaller aggregate for the pedestrian system. The pedestrian system goes down in a thinner application. It's approximately 33 wet mils. So that aggregate is chosen to be slightly larger than the thickness of the coating. So it slightly protrudes from the coating, giving you that skid resistance or slip resistance. If you do not use the aggregates, the system will still function as a waterproofing membrane. However, when it gets wet, it can be very slippery. All right, so we're always going to require or highly encourage that you use the aggregate, okay? So we have 3 components. So if you're ordering these kits, make sure you have the 3 components, the base, the activator, and the appropriate aggregate. So again, we're going to be demonstrating the pedestrian system. So we're going to go ahead and grab the base portion. We have this handy dandy mixing cradle here. It's not something Pecora sells. It was developed by a local contractor of ours. And it's a really handy dandy tool to prevent the bucket from spinning when you're mixing the material. A lot of guys will just, cradle the bucket between their ankles or step on a rag, spread a rag through the handle so the bucket doesn't spin. This cradle eliminates the need for doing all that. So we have the base portion, we have our aggregate and our activator. So the order of addition, what we recommend is that you incorporate the aggregate first. So you're going to blend that in for about 30 seconds. So the aggregate, it's a proprietary blend of synthetic aggregate. Okay, this is not silica sand. This is a synthetic aggregate, unique to this system. So you're going to want to use, Mike, why don't you hold up the drill? We got a corded 1/2-inch heavy-duty drill. We have what they call a jiffy mixer, right? You want to use an appropriately sized jiffy mixer. This is good for 2-gallon pails. There's also a larger size for 5-gallon pails. That's going to give you, the right amount of surface area to create that vortex to get a good mix. Okay, so step 1 is adding the aggregate. So you pop your lid off your base portion, ensure you have the right color, incorporate the aggregate. Now, we're just going to give it a quick mix. You're going to want to slowly push that aggregate into the coating. If you go guns blazing at this point, you're gonna throw aggregate out of the pail all over the place. All right. So Mike's gonna slowly incorporate the aggregate into the material. He's gonna start mixing. We're gonna mix about 30 seconds or so. We're simply incorporating the aggregate prior to adding the catalyst. Because once you add the activator or the catalyst, the clock starts ticking, right? This material does have a pot life, so once you activate the material, the clock is ticking, and you have about 30 minutes to put down the material, 20 to 30 minutes. And that pot life or work life is going to be dependent on ambient conditions. Like, for example, today it's fairly cold. It's probably about in the upper 30s right now, low 40s. That's going to help extend your work life. Now, conversely, if you're down in Florida, it's hot, you're in direct sunlight, that's going to reduce your work life. So keep this in mind, when you're mixing these materials. All right, so Mike's got the synthetic aggregates incorporated. So the next step is adding the activator. So you want to pour the entire contents into the pail. That's very critical. This is a very specific ratio, 4-to-1 mix ratio. This is not a 1-to-1 product. It's a very specific ratio. You want to make sure you get all that activator out of the can. And then we're going to do a 2-minute mix. All right, so Mike's going to go ahead and start mixing. So Glenn, you want to time that? Glenn's going to, so it's important. We say 2 minutes, we mean 2 minutes, okay? Not 1 minute, not a minute and a half, 2 minutes. It's critical that you have a homogeneous mixture. You have a good mix of the activator and base to ensure you have a uniform cure. All right, so Mike's mixing the material. As far as application, it's going to be put down with V-notch squeegees. Again, if you're familiar with polyurethane traffic coatings, you're familiar with V-notch squeegees, right? This is the tool to trade that's used to put down these coatings. It's not one size fits all. There's a variety of sizes. It's the depth of the notches, the V-notches. That'll be indicative of how much coating is put down, right? So the lower the notch, if you will, the shallower the notch, the less coating you're going to put down. So anyway, for this application, we're doing a 1/4-inch notch squeegee. We're going to put down about 33 wet mils. So Mike's continuing to mix. So, surface prep, you want your concrete or plywood, of course, to be clean and dry. We can't emphasize that enough. It must be dry. So when you're talking about concrete, you're also going to want to consider internal, concrete moisture content. What we require is a 5% or less concrete moisture content. And there's several ways you can go about measuring that. Calcium chloride tests, relative humidity tests, the probe tests and so forth. There's a down and dirty rubber mat test, which is more of a day of application type test. But Pecora has technical literature addressing on the recommended methods of ensuring you have the appropriate moisture content of your concrete. The key is you don't want a moisture-laden slab that could wreak havoc on their coating. Polyurethane materials can be moisture sensitive. You can get bubbling, blistering, delamination of your coating if you have a moisture-laden slab. So you want to ensure that you have the appropriate moisture content on your slab. So Mike's went ahead and mixed the material for 2 minutes. He's pouring it out. As you can see, the aggregate is in the material already. We're not going to be broadcasting any aggregate after we put the coating down. This is a true single application system. So Glenn's got the squeegee here. We're working, for demonstration purposes, we're working with a very small space. As you can imagine, on a larger project, you're going to have areas cordoned off, typically gridded out per pail, so you know how much material to put down. You're putting down around 33 wet mils with a 1/4-inch notch squeegee. So we recommend that in the beginning stages of your application, you use a mill gauge to measure your coating thickness to ensure you have a proper thickness. And using the appropriately sized V-notch squeegees is, of course, going to assist in getting you there to the appropriate coverage. Sure.
Is that solvent-based or water-based?
It's a solvent-based. It's a polyurethane formula. Correct.
So
yep.
basically, part A, part B, because I missed it.
It's a yes, to bring you up to speed, it's a 2-component polyurethane.
2-component polyurethane. So
Correct.
you have the part A, part B.
Correct.
And you have a aggregate mixing there.
Yes, the third component would be the aggregate. Yes, sir. Yep.
Okay,
Absolutely.
okay, gotcha.
Yep.
Thank you.
So now that we have the coating squeegeed out, the final and critical, one of the critical steps is to back roll to ensure you have uniform distribution of that integral aggregate. So Glenn is back rolling here with what nap size roller? Quarter inch nap size roller, okay? So we're going to do a cross-directional back roll. So he's going to go in one direction and he's going to come back perpendicular. And again, this is just to ensure even distribution of that integral aggregate. Again, we're not going to be broadcasting any aggregate into this system. It's a one-step process. So again, this is the Pecora-Deck HB1100-SA polyurethane traffic coding system, high build system. This is a waterproofing and wear coat all in one. So as I mentioned previously, if you're using some of the other Pecora systems, our HB1000 for example, our Pecora-Deck 800 system, those systems will require the application, they're multi-laminate systems, they're going to require the application of a waterproofing coat, your base coat. Generally, base coats are going to be required, or waterproofing coats are going to be required when you're applying these coatings over occupied space. If you're not going over occupied space, technically you don't need a base coat. However, the base coat's incorporated into this material here, the waterproofing component that is. So again, it's a waterproofing component and wear coat all in one. So Glenn's going to go ahead and measure the coating thickness, which should be about 30 to 35 wet mils. The material is about 90% solids, so you're going to get very minimal shrinkage. So 33 wet mils is going to get you around 30 dry mils. We good, Glenn? Yep. All right, right on the money. So again, it's key to use the appropriately sized V-notch squeegee. Do not use a flat squeegee. You're not going to get the appropriate thickness. It's going to be too thin. And with this integral aggregate, it's going to be a nightmare. You're just going to be pushing piles of aggregate around. So you want the appropriately sized V-notch squeegee, the appropriate size nap roller, and of course all this information is in all of our literature. We have a 50-page application manual, we have product brochures, we have specification data sheets. There's an entire library of technical bulletins on our website, Pecora.com. There's an entire subsection of tech bulletins addressing deck coatings, how-tos, do's and don'ts, concrete moisture content requirements, equipment requirements. There's single-page application instructions for all the systems that we have out there, from parking decks, vehicular applications, heavy-duty vehicular applications. We have systems where we incorporate epoxy components into the system to really beef up the durability of those traffic coating systems. So really, the options are limitless with these polyurethane traffic coating systems. So again, this is the Pecora-Deck HB1100-SA, single application, high build, chemically curing, right? It's a two-part system, polyurethane traffic coating system for pedestrian and vehicular applications. So just to wrap up, we demonstrated our pedestrian system, no primer required. Single coat, mix up the material for 2 minutes, add the appropriate aggregate, squeegee it out, back roll, and you're done. It's simple as that. So again, Pecora-Deck HB1100-SA. So I thank you for your time.